Now, I'll tell you, not everybody in public office has failed to stand up for principles. I had the great honor of spending 5.5 years serving under Texas Attorney General Greg Abbott. And in my opinion, Attorney General Greg Abbott is the finest Attorney General in all 50 states. Now, there's a reason I say that. For the last 6 years, I spent 5.5 years as the Solicitor General of Texas. Now, the first question everyone asks, what on earth is a Solicitor General? The Solicitor General is the chief lawyer for the state of Texas in front of the U.S. Supreme Court and all the state and federal appellate courts. The Solicitor General is the lawyer that goes into court and represents the state when our liberties are under assault. Over 5.5 years serving alongside Attorney General Abbott, over and over again, Texas stood up, defended conservative principles, and won on a national level. We defended the Ten Commandments Monument. Many of you know it stands on the state capitol grounds. Has been there since 1961. Over 40 years the monument has stood there. And yet an individual plaintiff, a homeless man, an atheist, came into court and asked the federal court to order the Ten Commandments Monument to be bulldozed. The Attorney General's office defended the Ten Commandments Monument. We took it to the U.S. Supreme Court, and we won 5-4. All of us also remember several years ago when a federal court of appeals in California struck down the Pledge of Allegiance. The Federal Court of Appeals concluded it was unconstitutional for school children to utter the words, "One nation under God." And we wonder why we have the challenges we have today. Texas took the lead defending the Pledge of Allegiance. We assembled all 50 states in defense of the Pledge of Allegiance. We went before the U.S. Supreme Court, and we won unanimously defending the Pledge of Allegiance. Another example, closer to home. One of the great scourges we've seen in modern times has been the proliferation of sexual predators, of predators that targets our kids. The Attorney General's office, we created a cyber crimes unit where law enforcement officers go online and pretend to be 13-year-old girls. And inevitably, these officers are approached by predators who begin sexually explicit conversations with them. And the officers are trained, they never initiate anything, but they will reciprocate. They will mirror back whatever is initiated. And over again, these predators propose, let's meet in person. And they show up expecting to meet a 13-year-old girl to have sex with. And instead, they find a law enforcement officer that puts them in handcuffs and takes them away to jail. In the last 6 years, the Attorney General's office has placed in prison over 600 sexual predators across the state of Texas. Another example, one that I know nobody out here today cares about at all. The Second Amendment right to keep and bear arms. All of us know about the D.C. gun case, where a federal police officer in the District of Columbia, Dick Anthony Heller, brought a lawsuit against the District of Columbia because it was a crime. It was a criminal offense to possess an operable firearm in the District of Columbia. Texas took the lead defending the Second Amendment right to keep and bear arms. We assembled a coalition of states. I flew personally to Washington, D.C. and argued in the Federal Court of Appeals in defense of the right to keep and bear arms. We took it to the U.S. Supreme Court defending the Second Amendment, and we won 5-4. Now you'll notice a pattern over and over again. These fights keep coming and coming and coming. And these battles over and over again are 5-4 and 5-4 and 5-4 and 5-4. And yet the last case I want to talk to you about, I think, is even scarier than all four of the other ones. It's a case called Medellin versus Texas. It originated in Houston in 1993, where two teenage girls were walking home one night and they stumbled into a gang initiation. And they ended up being gang raped and murdered. Houston is a city pretty hardened to violent crime. I grew up in Houston. This was a crime so horrible, it really shocked the conscience of the city. These criminals were all caught, they confessed, and they were convicted. And then the case took a very, very strange turn. Because the World Court, which is the judicial arm of the United Nations, the World Court issued an order to the United States to reopen the convictions of 51 murderers across this country. It's the first time in the history of our nation that a foreign court has ever tried to bind the U.S. justice system. Medellin, one of those gang rapists and murderers, was one of those 51. Texas fought the World Court. We took the case to the U.S. Supreme Court. I had the great honor of arguing the case twice in front of the United States Supreme Court. On the other side, we had 90 nations that came in against the state of Texas. The entire European Union, most of Latin America, all of them came in and said the U.S. justice system should be completely under the authority of the World Court and the United Nations. And we also had on the other side the President of the United States. Texas stood up against 90 nations and the President of the United States. We stood up and we defended U.S. sovereignty. And we won 6-3. Now that case is a powerful illustration of the challenges that we face. But it also illustrates that as important as defending our liberties have been for the past 6 years, the reason I'm running for Attorney General is the job of defending our liberties has just become 1,000 times more important. One of the leading players on the other side from the state of Texas in the Medellin case was the dean of Yale Law School, a man named Harold Koh, who twice filed briefs against the state of Texas arguing that the U.S. Supreme Court should be completely under the authority of the World Court. President Barack Obama has now named Harold Koh to be the chief legal advisor at the U.S. Department of State. So the most radical academic in the country for giving up U.S. sovereignty, and that's precisely who Harold Koh is now the #1 lawyer at the U.S. Department of State. This fight keeps on coming. And one of the terrific points that I've made all over the state of Texas, the job of Attorney General has a unique ability and responsibility to stand up and defend the state of Texas. You know, the Attorney General is the only statewide elected official who can litigate on behalf of the state of Texas. For the last 6 years, Texas has repeatedly stood up and fought the federal government when the federal government was in the wrong. And if we were willing to do so when our friend George W. Bush was in the White House, how much more so do you think we'll be willing to do so with President Barack Obama?